The Reformed Gamers is brought to you 100% independent and ad-free thanks to our dear patrons over on patreon.com/thereformedgamers to get yourself sweet perks such as uncut early access to the episodes, special episodes of the podcast, and more. Head on over to patreon.com/theformedgamers and consider lending support and joining the herd. Without further ado, let's hop into the show.
Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to episode 187 of the Reformed Gamers, the show all about theology, video games, and forming a hunting party to hunt down dragons and dinosaurs and all sorts of crazy animals. I'm your host, Logan, and joining me on this episode is not Adam. He's out traveling, visiting family. We got Zach B coming back on the show.
Hey,
dude,
what up?
You guys will probably remember Zach from our PC episode that was like back in the early years of the show, and then we did a recent PC building myths and tips and tricks and things like that episode.
How long ago was that?
That was last year.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, quarantine has this COVID has completely jacked with my timeline.
Oh, dude, same here. But yeah, no, I remember it because it was literally like right after I had built my PC and I was on that It's kind of like when you start, you become a Christian or you find out about Reformed theology and you go on this cage stage. That was in the midst of my cage stage of PC building.
Yeah, so. Yeah. That's a very apt analogy. That is for sure.
So good. Oh man, I remembered I used this. I used PC building as like an analogy. This past Wednesday night or a couple Wednesday nights ago with my students, just trying to get them to think when we get all hyped about all these different things to share with other people and tell people about and evangelize about that. I told them about PC building and all that. And I was like, but then, we get excited about that. But then when it comes to telling people about Jesus, we freeze up and they were all like, oh, that hurt a little bit. I'm like, yeah, let's talk about it. So, but it was all good.
PC is a segue into the gospel. I love it. I dig it.
That's how it works, man. That's how it works. That's how youth pastor brains work. But dear listeners, I am back on the show after a 30-day break from the show. There's a lot of things I learned about myself and content creation and the show, and some things I'll be cutting back on, but I'll get into that probably during patch notes. And I mean, you guys have probably already seen it on Twitter. I announced I'm pretty much done with Twitch, but we'll see how that changes and things like that as the months go by. But back on the show, ready to talk about some Monster Hunter in case you hadn't checked the image of the episode, the title, or I mean, maybe you're listening on Patreon. Maybe you're just like, oh, dude, an early uncut episode of the podcast. I'm going to listen. We're going to be talking about Monster Hunter this episode because when this episode drops on public feeds, Monster Hunter Rise comes out this Friday on the Nintendo Switch. Demo is available for the Nintendo Switch. You haven't played it already.
Wait, it comes out tomorrow?
No. The week that this episode comes out.
Okay.
Next Monday.
It made my heart jump with excitement here.
Here's the thing. I had thought, because I'm taking a vacation this week, I thought, I'm like, cool, I'm going to record the episode of the podcast on Monster Hunter on Thursday night. I'm going to play Monster Hunter Rise all day Friday. And then I looked at I saw a tweet by Nintendo talking about it. I'm like, oh, it comes out. The episode 26th. Comes out. It's like, wow, Logan. Way to go. Well, at least you have the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League to look forward to and Falcon and Winter Soldier. So
I've heard great things about that too.
I have too. I don't know if I'm ready to brave the 4-hour gauntlet that it's going to be, but
yeah, that's going to be an endeavor.
Hopefully it will be good. Hopefully it will be good. With that being said, dear listeners, just a brief bit of housekeeping before we get into the show. Micah's been knocking out some news articles here on the website. So head over to thereformedgamers.com. Check out the website. He recently covered the new PSVR controllers that are going to be coming out for PS5. And I got to say, they look pretty slick, but there was some other VR unit that used controllers that looked similar to that. And I can't remember if it was the Vive or if it was other one that I can't think of at the moment.
So the Vive, oh man, now I'm doubting myself. Yeah, I think it was. I know Steam's version has controllers that look eerily similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Vive at one point did that. The Oculus still does that.
That's what it is. Oculus.
I have an Oculus Quest 2, which is the one that has the ARM processor in it, so like you don't need a PC to use it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But it can hook up to your PC too. I mean, this is totally off topic, but highly recommend it. It is an amazing piece of tech for $300. It's excellent. But yeah, it reminded me a lot of the Quest 2's controller for sure.
Yeah. So looking forward to that. Hopefully it runs really well. I'm excited to kind of get back into VR on PlayStation, but we'll see how it goes. But speaking of VR, I mean, you kind of talked about it a little bit. I see it here in the notes. Let's just hop over into what have we been playing. So Zach, man, I'm not even saying the normal build up. I said, whatever, this is the show. We do what we want. So Zach, man, what have you been playing, man? Let the dear listeners know. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, well, I got crazy lucky with a PS5 drop at the beginning of March through Walmart.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I was able to, it was completely on a whim too. Like I was trolling Twitter and saw randomly Wario64 tweet out, "Oh, hey, PS5 drops happening in 5 minutes." I was like, "Oh, okay, let me see if I can maybe get one." Sure enough, loaded it into my cart and checked out in like 2 minutes. And I was like, "Oh, this is the easiest console I've ever bought."
That's amazing, because I've heard horror stories about going onto Walmart and trying to get one of the new consoles.
Yeah. Admittedly, I feel kind of bad that it took zero effort on my part to get this thing. And I've got friends who are way more Sony. What is it? Sony Pony Boys or something? I don't know.
Sony Pony, yeah, man.
Sony Ponies. And you still don't have one. And I was just like, I just clicked on the Walmart website and found it and instantly checked out. So, but yeah, with it, the what is it? The PS Plus collection, I think they call it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, dude. So I'm mostly a PC only kind of guy. And so I have my Switch, but I pretty much missed out on any of the PS4 exclusives for the most part. I had a PS4 in like 2016, I think, is when we played Titanfall 2 together a lot. But other than that, I sold it pretty shortly after and never went back to it. So I've just been enjoying the crap out of the Final Fantasy VII Remake and Persona 5. Oh my gosh, Persona 5 is so good. I cannot believe I waited this long to play it.
Gotta enjoy it, man. It's so good. And then without spoiling anything, and really you could just tell me like what number palace you're on and I'll know where you're at, but kind of where are you at so far in the game?
I'm currently trying to find the Treasure in Palace 1.
Okay.
So I'm not terribly far.
Yeah. I know where you're at.
I think I'm level 6 or 7. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you're still pretty early on in the game then.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, I literally just got the PS5 3 days ago, so it took forever to get here. Walmart terribly slow on shipping that thing. But yeah, and then the other one is Super Hot on the Oculus Quest 2. Super Hot in VR. Absolutely amazing experience.
Definitely the way to play it. I played it both in VR and regular, and man, VR is way better.
Yeah, I don't know how you would do it without VR. I mean, you said you tried it, but I don't know how that would work, honestly.
It's not near as fun, I can tell you that.
I was going to say, I suppose you just move with joysticks, but it's like, I don't know, a really, really cheap knockoff of the Matrix at that point.
Yeah. It's about how it feels. But so it's pretty good though.
Yeah. I mean, VR, honestly, VR is like VR and AR, augmented reality. I mean, honestly, that's the future of gaming, I think. Like there's always going to be consoles. There's always going to be PCs, but like, I don't know, Apple's releasing like a 16K resolution VR headset next year. That's supposed to be like $2,000, but it's supposed to be like just completely next level. Complete like body sensing, your body's the controllers, like yeah, it's supposed to be pretty unreal from people who have already tried it out. So I don't know, man. I really do think it is the future though. Like putting on the Quest 2, I'm not tethered to anything. That you can tether it to the PC, but being able to move around freely and use your, they're getting better with hand tracking, that I don't need my controllers for every game, but like yeah, there's just a different level of immersion that's, I don't know, it just takes things to the next level.
Yeah. That's kind of been my thing with VR for a while, is like, it's one of those things where, because I think longtime listeners know when VR was announced, at least for PlayStation, me and Adam, I can't remember if Adam made fun of it, but I know I definitely did. And like, it's one of those things where after we got our PSVR headsets, we were like, this is really cool. And then after I paid more attention to kind of what Oculus and the Vive and all those were doing, I was like, that's kind of what I want. Like, it kind of made me look at my PSVR and go, this feels so ground level. Like, I want to step up and get more into it, because I do think it's really cool. And some of the stuff that they've been doing in VR is really, really rad. And so I'm excited to kind of see, at least on the PSVR front, what they're going to be doing. But man, a 16K VR headset with body sensing, it just sounds like Ready Player One at that point.
So. I mean, it is dangerously close to that. I mean, honestly, the next step would be like some sort of haptic feedback suit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where there's like collision detection and stuff. But
oh man, that would be wild. That's probably going to get here sooner than we think it will. But yeah, well then, to talk a little bit about what I've been playing in the whole 30 days that I've been not doing content creation, things like that. Y'all, I got sucked into Dark Souls 3 and beat that in the first DLC of Ashes of Arendelle. And like, and I mentioned this in the pre-show, so patrons heard this. Dark Souls 3 is in my top 5 favorite games of all time at this point. Game is incredible. Like, I would go so far as to say that game is perfect. Probably gonna get some slack for that one, but like, I thoroughly enjoyed that game to the point where when I got to the end and I beat it and the credits rolled, I was like, I am legitimately sad that I just beat this game, because I wanted it to keep going. And there's New Game Plus, and I'm probably gonna go for the Platinum Trophy on it anyway. So, I'm gonna get plenty of hours out of the game, but what an incredible ride, man. And, oh, golly.
It's so funny you say, like, it's the perfect game. And I've heard people critique it for how clunky the movement feels sometimes. But what's wild about that is I feel like Dark Souls 3, like, takes notes from, like, Bloodborne and Demon Souls and all that. And it, like, perfects it in a way where, yeah, maybe you could make that argument, but, like, the clunkiness, I feel like, adds to the combat, right? Like, what, with iframes and everything else. I mean, like, ultimately, Dark Souls takes a lot of what Monster Hunter did so well all the way back in like 2004 and 5, when they introduced like the concept of invulnerability frames. When I use that term, iframe, and like when you're dodging, monsters, skills, swords, etc. It takes all of that and then just builds on it to a point where there's a reason why everyone wanted to clone Dark Souls.
Yeah, it's refined gameplay is really what it is, and it's funny. You mentioned people that kind of found the movement clunky and stuff like that. I jumped straight into Dark Souls 3 after finishing Dark Souls Remastered. And Dark Souls 3 felt like I was driving a Ferrari when I was previously rolling around in a beat up VW Bug. And so When I played, I
It's
was like,
really different.
Yeah, I was like, I can't handle this. This is too fast. There's too much power. Oh my gosh, I'm getting
there's a reason they remade those or remastered those games.
Yeah, and so, but yeah, once you get used to it, oh man, Dark Souls 3 is a blast. Man, I loved. I don't think there was a single boss fight in Dark Souls 3 that I absolutely hated. Like in Dark Souls 1, I can think of a couple boss fights that I really hated, especially the most hated one within the series, whose name I forget, but it's a giant tree that shoots fire and has really bad hitboxes on its branches that just swipe at you and it destroys the floor.
Oh yeah. I had Luke beat that for me in co-op. I couldn't handle that tree anymore.
It's a terrible boss fight. Someone modded it and showed how ridiculous the hitboxes were on its branches that it uses to sweep at you, and it's so broken, dude. It is it's bad. Yeah. But man, Dark Souls 3, I mean, of course, you're going to have your frustrations when you're playing the game. People invade you, some bosses get you, but like, I enjoyed the whole like 40 to I think almost 45 hours I put in that game so far, and so stinking good. But after I finished that, I was like, you know what? Me and Adam have been talking. He picked up Demon Souls, and I have it, and I still need to play through it. And so I've been putting more time into that. And man, that is a huge. I hate to call it a downgrade because it just sounds so negative. It's several steps back on the Dark Souls formula. When Blue Point remade the game, they really were faithful to the original, which is good. But in several ways, it's bad because it just. When you go from Dark Souls 3 to Demon Souls, Dark Souls 3 had a plethora of bonfires to where it felt like you were making steady progress as you explore. But in Demon Souls, you start off with your first one, and then in order to get your next one, you have to basically beat a boss, and that's how you get your next bonfire. And so you have to really explore, really find the shortcuts, and pay attention to your world tendency, which depending on if it goes light or dark, it can make the game a little bit easier. It can make the game a lot harder for you. I don't particularly care for that mechanic, but it is... it's fine. I don't hate it, but it's just hard to go. It's just hard to play that after you play Dark Souls 3, and I'm just like, there's a huge shift between the two.
I've always described that kind of shift. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you've had your interaction with these kind of people who are, kind of the gaming grandpas of our community, where it's like, oh yeah, I remember back in my day, Sonic 3 so much more difficult than Sonic Mania. And it's just like, well, no, sorry, but the Sega Genesis controller is actually what made that difficult, not the game. You know what I mean? Like, there's things that were outside of its sphere of influence as a game that were influencing the difficulty of it, right? Dark Souls 3 has some, and like it's pretty minimal, but like some instances where they just completely bait you into a non-counterable situation that kills you. Demon Souls does that just for the sake of doing that. And honestly, like Donkey's review of it, now that is not a family-friendly channel, so please hear that before you go clicking on Video Game Donkey's channel. But his review of it, I definitely recommend, because that's kind of what he points out, is like he makes those comparisons exactly like you're making them, and kind of concludes like, yeah, they remade it and added a bunch of particle effects and some quality of life stuff, but at the end of the day, what made that game bad still exists.
Yeah, exactly. And so it is what it is. I will say this though, because I know a lot of people are getting this with their PS5s, and this is going to be their first, Soulsborne style game. If you can play this and get past all of the
oh my goodness
hurdles, I think you're going to handle some of the other. You can definitely handle Dark Souls Remastered after jumping into this.
Absolutely.
That game's probably going to feel super easy to you after playing this one, but it's just one of those things where I think this is one of those, like, if you're going to jump into the genre, and if you have a PS5, this is probably the one to start with, in my opinion. Because it just keeps getting better after that. And so it is what it is. But if you guys are playing on PS5, let me know, and we'll do some co-op and stuff like that. I texted Adam and told him, like, dude, I'm like 5 bosses in. He's like, I just made my character. You need to slow down. And so I was like, oh, my bad. But by the time he gets past the first boss, I will probably have beaten the game. I'm actually at what's that guy's name? The one that can suck your soul levels out with like a falcon punch.
Oh yeah,
The old King Gallant. That's it.
Yeah.
So I'm at that fight, and I'm like, great. This is the guy I've heard stories about. So, but that's where I'm at.
Probably the cheesiest / most difficult in the game, I would say. After that, it's pretty smooth sailing.
I'm probably gonna cheese that boss. I learned if you just let him walk to the steps and then turn his back to you, you can run up behind him and use a poison attack, and it just makes the fight totally
that's
pointless. So I'm gonna try that, and we'll see how it goes. The last game I'm going to talk about, I've only put about 8 hours into this game. I feel like that's not enough time to really talk much about it, but I've been playing Bravely Default 2.
I was excited to hear your initial thoughts of it.
So, how do I say this without making our audience really angry? I think
you can.
I know. I'm gonna say it like this. I think I'm at a point in my life where JRPGs are just not for me anymore.
Absolutely, I completely resonate with that.
It just, because in the 8 hours that I've spent in this game, I've beaten one boss, I think, and the rest of it has just been me progressing the story and trying to figure out how the job system works and grinding out levels and trying to figure out what the right gear is and equipment and all that stuff, and then doing side quests, which are basically just fetch quests, which are super boring. And there's some things I like about it. Like, I like the combat and all the accessibility stuff of speeding up the battle speed and just using the different moves and stuff like that.
If a game has to speed up its battle animations and everything, like,
it's definitely,
I don't know, that sends a message, in my opinion.
That's how I got through Dragon Quest XI, to be honest with you. I just ramped up the battle speed all the way up as high as it would go.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. Like, my thing with this game is let me start with the things I don't like. I don't like the way it looks. I feel like they should have went for a more Octopath Traveler style aesthetic, because I think that would have translated better. Not a huge fan of the voice acting, because it's hit or miss depending on the characters. There's one pirate character in particular that just sounds really, really stupid, in my opinion. I would have rather it been silent and just let me read the stuff like I'm used to in JRPGs.
Right.
And I'm going to preface it with this. I'm not good at this, but I don't like the Brave default system where you defend and bank your turns so you can use your Brave to activate those extra turns, so you can do like up to 4 attacks or moves in one turn. I don't like it because I feel like I'm not using it correctly. And so it just goes into why I don't think JRPGs are for me anymore, because that requires me to invest more time into the game. And so I'm spending more time learning the mechanics of the game and grinding levels than I am progressing. And that's just not cutting it for me. So with 8 hours into the game, I'm not going to recommend it or not recommend it either way. I'm just going to say that so far, I feel like I've spent more time trying to understand the game than I have really made progress in it. And so I don't know. I may continue playing this one. I may not. I'm not really sure at this point, but it's just, like I said, I like the combat. The combat is, classic JRPG stuff. You have the job system, which I love job systems in JRPGs. The ability to change one character to another class and really change the strategy up and really kind of use that to beat a boss or certain enemies. Love that stuff. Loved it in Final Fantasy, and Octopath Traveler even had it in there. I love that stuff, but it's a mixed bag for me. But I think, I don't know. If you're playing it, dear listeners, you let me know what you think of the game. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can share some tips with me. And maybe I can
here's how I would say it, especially with Bravely Default 2. We the gaming community knows that Bravely Default is a love letter to old school JRPGs, Final Fantasy VI. I like all the older Final Fantasy games, right?
Right.
The problem is that love letters are specific to specific people.
Yeah, it's a good point.
When it comes down to it, that love letter was not intended for me at all. And it was the same with Bravely Default 1. I put it down after about 16 hours and just YouTubed the rest of the story because I was like, man, I don't actually want to dread playing a game. I don't have the time anymore. And yeah, like you said, the pacing and having to grind in a way where the impact of that grind isn't felt in meaningful ways without hours spent. I agree. Just not for me anymore.
Yeah. And that's kind of a good thing to point out. You said that you don't want to dread playing a game. And I just take that comparison of me playing Bravely Default 2 and me playing Dark Souls 3 and how much excitement and anticipation and eagerness I had to get back to Dark Souls 3 versus I'm just sort of like, I guess I'll try out Bravely Default 2 for a couple more hours. So that's a good point. That's a good point.
Let it be known, so I'm not called a hypocrite, because I bragged on Persona 5 right before this. Persona 5 takes that JRPG formula and evolves it and modernizes it in a way that it isn't. Every fight's engaging, the art style. I mean, everything about Persona 5 takes that formula and just brings it to the next level. So
yeah, for sure. I would say that game, I would also say that Persona 5 is a perfect game, but that it's going to take you 100 hours to get through the story. So that's the only thing I can really, that's like the only thing that I can really say negative about Persona 5, but that's
right.
We did an episode on Persona 5. Dear listeners, you guys can go listen to that on the back catalog, but let's switch gears here and jump over to what have we been reading. Zach, man, what have you been getting into?
So I'm in my last 2 classes for my MDiv at Covenant Theological Seminary, and
awesome.
Super excited to be done with school. But that means what I've been reading is the Bible, and specifically Isaiah 9, 2-7. And I just got done yesterday around noon with a very large translation paper interacting with a lot of critical sources and then everything else. So my brain is kind of fried, but I know those verses like the back of my hand. So that's what I've been reading. I mean, everything associated with those verses too, might I add. So a lot of old dead Germans who love to use source and historical criticism, and a lot of 60s and 70s dudes, old white dudes who I have no idea if they're still alive, but they wrote a lot on it, so I've been reading them too.
Fair enough, man. So
I would recommend reading Isaiah. I wouldn't recommend reading a lot of those commentaries.
Especially if you can't read German, right?
Especially if you can't read German. Forget Hebrew. If you don't know German, I mean.
Yeah. So what is the gist of Isaiah 9, 2-7?
Yeah, I mean, it is a messianic poem, psalm, hymn-like psalm that is a promise, a prophecy of promise that God, Yahweh, is going to do these things on behalf of his people and the faithful remnant talked about in Isaiah. And, verse 2 says the people who've walked in darkness have seen a great light, and ends with the famous lines that we hear every Advent season. For to us a child is born, to us a child is given. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And the verse in verse 7 ends with the zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. And that will do this as I learned through my translation work, the will do this is the most important part of those verses, because all throughout the prophecy, he's using, they call it the prophetic perfect. And the perfect is how the verb is. I'm getting into the nitty gritty too much. Basically, it's a future tense at the end of verse 7, which means it's something that will be done on behalf of God's people, that the Lord himself will do. And it's pretty mind-blowing to think about that back in 8th century Judah and Israel, and processing that, hearing that as your country is being ravaged by Assyria. A lot of hope, but boy, they were in darkness for sure when they heard that prophecy.
Man, sounds pretty timely, man, considering kind of everything that's going on in the world today. It's kind of a good message that we all need to be reminded of, despite everything that's going on, God's still going to accomplish his will, and he's still ruling and reigning, which is a thing I often forget, at least, but that's good stuff. As far as what I've been reading, then this is going to be, I know how emotionally charged this kind of topic can be, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but I am reading very slowly reading Ryan T. Anderson's When Harry Became Sally. It's talking about transgender issues and the surgeries involved in that, getting testimonials from people who have transitioned, then detransitioned. And for a lot of people that are probably wondering, wait, is that the book that they took off Amazon? Yes, this is the book that they took off Amazon. I bought this around launch 2-3 years ago. And so I was like, well, given everything that's going on in Amazon delisting it, I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. It's probably also going to be helpful too, because I'm sure a lot of parents in my youth group are going to have questions about this particular topic. So I got to kind of know what I'm talking about, I guess. And it has been wild to read the first, I think, 3 or 4 chapters of the book so far, because what I appreciate about Ryan's approach into this topic is he's coming at it like, okay, here are the facts about it. Here's what's going on. Let's talk about it and break it down. It's kind of a similar approach to Tony Reinke's 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You. He's not approaching it with, cell phones are evil, stop using them. He's like, no, here's the data. Let's look at it together. Let's see how it's affecting us and go from there and ask questions about it. And I just wrapped up a chapter where he just let people who have transitioned and are detransitioned or in the process of detransitioning share their testimonials. And dude, it is wild to hear kind of the opposing arguments of transgenderism and kind of how it affects the body, and just some really horror stories of going into psychiatrists who just started prescribing transition stuff within the second or third meeting of the person. And I'm like, dude, I've gone through like counseling and, it's just for anxiety and depression, but like it took several, more than just 2 or 3 meetings to really start digging deep and trying to figure out, okay, what is really going on here? Let's talk through some of these things. And it's mind blowing, man. And so I'm going to keep reading it because, again, I like learning, and anytime someone tells me not to read something, I'm like, well, you just engage the Streisand effect. I want to read it even more now and find out why I'm not supposed to read it. And so it's an interesting read. For those of you that are in ministry, I think it would be a helpful book for you to read, just to kind of get a sense of kind of where some people are coming from and kind of where they're at mentally and some of the stuff that maybe they've dealt with. I think it's only going to help you be a more effective minister to people as they come into your church, and just be able to minister to people and love on them better. So it's eye-opening for sure. It's very fascinating, and I would definitely encourage.
Really good to read. Honestly, I'll be real with you. When I saw that in the show notes, I'm like, Bro, what is he? Is he seriously going to talk about Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan, how Harry met Sally?
Yeah,
Or
dude,
when Harry met
absolutely.
Sally? I was like, I'm so confused right now. I was like, where is this coming from? And it's like one of those moments where you read something and your brain kind of fills it in.
Yeah.
When you started saying what you were saying, I was like, oh, became Sally. I was like, oh my goodness, I did not understand where we were going with this.
Yeah, no, it's the sequel where they swap bodies. It's a Freaky Friday scenario, and it's just a crazy.
I would watch that. Netflix. I mean, if you're listening to TRG, pick that up.
And Netflix, if you're listening, please don't screw up the Cowboy Bebop thing you're working on, because I will be.
Oh no!
Royally upset.
Didn't they already admit that they were getting rid of the corgi?
Are you serious?
Oh yeah, I swear I read an article about that.
Wow.
When I saw that, I instantly lost all faith.
Netflix, you're dead to me. Let's move on to the topic of the show, something a little more lighthearted and fun. Quick reminder, dear listeners, before we get into the topic, to rate and review the show on your podcast app of choice, whether it's iTunes, Podchaser, or whatever it is you're using. That helps us out in a huge way and boosts us in the algorithm. But let's talk about this game series that has a huge fan base, a very loyal fan base, but also garners a little bit of like apprehension from people, because it's kind of like Dark Souls, where you hear how difficult it is, or maybe you hear some things about it and people are a little apprehensive. But if you guys haven't heard already, I'm going to read this little synopsis thing I have written down in here in our show notes. And Monster Hunter has been a critically acclaimed series where you hunt monsters. While it's somewhat of a niche, Monster Hunter World kind of brought the game into the mainstream, selling. I lost track of how many copies that game sold. It was a ridiculous amount. It's one of Capcom's most successful games.
Yep.
And then with Monster Hunter Rise on the way, I figured we'd spend some time discussing our time with the series, what makes it great, as well as a brief history of the series. And that history is actually where we're going to start off with. So, Zach, like I said, I put it in here in the show notes, and I meant to pull it up on Wikipedia, but man, you filled it out. So give us a brief rundown of the history of Monster Hunter.
Oh man, where to begin? Monster Hunter. Let's talk about a philosophy of Monster Hunter. No.
Okay.
Monster Hunter. I mean, like you said, I think the Dark Souls comparison is pretty apt, because not everyone's going to love Monster Hunters, and not everyone's going to love Dark Souls. I mean, both of the games, I'm not calling them, clones of one another, but the combat is definitely something that takes time to get used to for a lot of people. I mean, it started all the way back on the PS2. And it's predominantly a Japanese only game. It wasn't until now, granted, they did release it on the PS2 over in North America and Europe here back in, I put 04 through 06. I don't know how accurate that is. I want to say it was just one, and it was Monster Hunter 2. And that was like kind of popular, because a lot of people were like importing that thing over from Japan, because PS2s weren't region locked, or maybe they were, and I'm forgetting that. But in any case, people were doing that, and Capcom took notice, and they, when the PSP started getting really popular, and they came out with that sliding version.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that one? Yeah,
I do. Yeah.
I worked at GameStop when that thing came out, and that it sold out instantly. Everyone loved that thing. That was like when they tried to do the PSP phone, but like no one went for it.
Someone posted about that recently in the Facebook group. I was like, this is hilarious. I remember reading about this not too long ago, and here it is again.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it feels like they were like, Sony was maybe like 6 years too early.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
5 to 6 years too early. I mean, because honestly, the PS5 should have been a hybrid, like the Switch. I think that thing would have sold like crazy. Anyways, that's a tangent. But Monster Hunter after 06, because the PSP sold like crazy in Japan as well. it started targeting, I guess, quote unquote, mobile, not necessarily phones, but like the PSP, the 3DS kind of market. And it was really popular in Japan to like have your 3DS. I don't know if if you've had a 3DS, but with a 3DS, you could like walk by other people who had their 3DS on them, and like you could exchange. Like there were some Pokemon games that did that. In
Yeah.
Monster Hunter, you would give your like guild card, which was basically like your character, to people when you walk by, and that was so popular in Japan. They added like multiplayer that way, and anywho, that caused like a huge outcry in the West. Be like, all right, we need Monster Hunter in the West. So they released Try, which I don't know why they just didn't call it 3, but they released Try on the Wii, and that was like moderately successful. But then 3U came out on the Wii U and the 3DS, and that is kind of that's where my love for the game started.
Mm-hmm.
Was on that 3U, on the Wii U specifically, and then on the 3DS. And then the 4U came out on the 3DS in 2015. World after that, and then now Rise on the Switch. And I didn't put in like Generations on the Switch, or there were some other offshoot games, because technically speaking, even though they were like published by Capcom, they're not part of the main series of Monster Hunter.
Just kind of as you're like going through these, I'm like taking a trip down memory lane. I'm like, man, which one did I start with? Because I had the Wii U, and I remember playing Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, but I can't remember if it was like the game or if it was like a demo of the game that I was playing. The one that I remember spending a ton of time with was 4 Ultimate, was the one that I remember putting a lot of time into, because I played it with you and Luke and a few other people in TRG. And I even got the limited edition silver 3DS that came with it.
Oh, that's right. I remember
so that. Good times, man. That was my first real introduction into the series. So with
that was absolutely the best one to like hop in before World 2, because like it was like the most fleshed out, I guess, Monster Hunter had ever been at that point. Yeah.
Now I'm looking at Google here, and it shows that Generations, and I remember that one came out a year after 4 Ultimate. Like, so when you mentioned that some of the games aren't really considered part of like the main thing, would Generations be something that's like a side game in the series, or is that one considered to be in the main line thing?
Yeah, so Generations like isn't the main series. So
okay,
they did that. I don't know why, but there was a few others like that. I can't think of. I'm trying to remember what they did, but it was basically like Capcom gave creative freedom to a lot of other different companies to kind of run with, the Monster Hunter title. Kind of like how Nintendo does that with a lot of different games. I mean, Japanese companies do that a lot, where they'll have like someone remake a game for them or remaster it. Platinum Games does that, right? So, but yeah, anywho, because they're not considered main series games, none of their quality of life or mechanics transferred over into other games. They may have like advanced on them in other games, but specifically like Generations took the 4U kind of formula and added more of like, I was trying to think about this before the show, how to describe it, but the only way I could ever describe it was like arcadey kind of feel to it. It was a little faster paced, a little more flashy, like you had a few more different moves with whatever weapon you had, kind of thing. But at the end of the day, honestly, Generations, it was like just your typical Monster Hunter formula kind of game before World, right? So it had like instanced zones, right? It wasn't just one continuous world like Monster Hunter World was. And so it still suffered from a lot of the lack of quality of life things that World kind of implemented.
Mm-hmm.
So what makes that like so important though, in like this whole pitch of, hey, listeners, you should really play Rise when it comes out, is that Rise, being a main series game, takes everything from World and is expanding on it. So much so that they're releasing it on PC in early 2022.
Yeah, I remember reading about that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So even though it's not going to look like World did with the, I guess I would say, ultra realistic, quote unquote, graphic style, it still has like an evolution of that old Monster Hunter feel. It's still like like a graphics evolution of that. And honestly, I'm really surprised it's not coming to PS4 and or well, to PS4, 5, and Xbox. Because honestly, like it feels like it's an advancement on that point. I don't know, man. It's so hard to describe, especially if you haven't played the series. But honestly, Rise feels like the true sequel to everything a Monster Hunter fanatic wanted, and World feels like its own thing. I don't know how else to describe it. Like World really does feel like an entirely different game that used the Monster Hunter world to build around.
Yeah.
And Rise feels like the true successor of 4U.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that, like how hard it is to describe it, and Monster Hunter World being its own thing. Because I remember playing Monster Hunter World and going and thinking the same thing. Like, this feels like a huge departure from what I know of Monster Hunter, but at the same time, it's still Monster Hunter, but it's that thing that kind of broke the door open and made it more accessible for people to come in. I remember friends who had never played Monster Hunter before playing the demo multiple times and going, I think I'm going to pick the game up and keep playing it. And these are people that I always caution them, when I was telling them about Monster Hunter, hey, it's a little complex. It doesn't really hold your hand when it comes to figuring out what weapons you want to use.
It's a bit of a time sink.
It's a time sink. You're going to spend a lot of time in this. But I had a few friends, a few of them that listen to the show actually, who picked up Monster Hunter World and just dove in and have sunk. We talked in the pre-show, you're trying to figure out how many hours you have sunk into some of the Monster Hunter games and which one you put the most time into. I've had friends who have put 200-300 hours into this game because they've just been playing it. They played the DLC. They're like, this is really cool. And this was their first Monster Hunter. And so some of them have Switches and they're really looking forward to Rise. And it's the thing that, like, it's weird because I remember when I first got into Monster Hunter, and I think really 4 Ultimate was the one that I first got into. And it's so, we're kind of probably going to make a lot of comparisons to Dark Souls in the sense that it doesn't really hold your hand. Like, if you're going to learn some of the basic stuffs about traversal, movement, trying to find weaknesses of the monsters, and if you cut off their tails or their spines or some kind of thing or a tusk or something, you can use that to craft other weapons. But like, if you really want to figure out the game, you're gonna have to spend some time messing around with the different weapons, really checking out the different items, crafting things, crafting whole armor sets to handle a few different types of monsters depending on their elements.
Yep.
It is a complex game, but I don't know what it was about Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, but I got sucked into it and trying to figure out all that stuff. And I think that's kind of a make or break thing. But something about Monster Hunter World, what they did that was unique, they kind of held your hand a little bit more, but I don't know, they made it a little more accessible to people who have never played this game before. And in so doing, like I said earlier, it's one of Capcom's best-selling games of all time, and so I think you created that. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, and I don't know if we covered this, but Zach, which one did you say that you started with?
I started with 3U on so 3U. I don't know if I said Ultimate or not, but 3U stands for Ultimate, and it was like Japanese games do this all the time, like with the Persona series, right? Persona 4, Persona 4 Golden, Persona 5, Persona 5 Royal, and so it has like expanded content and stuff on it. So that's what the Ultimate games are, or the U games are. And I played that. That was the first one to ever come out in HD, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, and so on the Wii U, that was a ton of fun. I I loved my Wii U, man. Like that was a really fun console that was so underutilized.
Definitely, man.
But yeah, I put oh my goodness, I put at least 600 hours into that one.
That's awesome. That's a lot of time, but that's one of the reasons why I brought you on the show, because I'm like, if I'm going to talk about Monster Hunter, I need to bring a Monster Hunter veteran on the show here.
What's crazy is like, I mean, it seems like Monster Hunter always comes out, besides Rise, Monster Hunter always comes out at like the perfect life moment for me, where it's like, I just graduated college. I was waiting for, a job and everything like that. And so like, I had this like awkward extra chunk of time where,
yeah,
Monster Hunter 3U was just what I was playing at the moment, and I just got super obsessed with it, and obsessed with the series. And then it was the same with 4U and World. I flew back up to Minnesota because I'm from Wisconsin, Minnesota area, and I like we binge played it. It was winter break at seminary, and like I just went to a buddy's place and played it with him and Luke, and oh man, I think in that one weekend, I mean, we beat all of the content the game had to offer, but I mean, we played that like
that's awesome,
way too much. It was like 12 hours a day. I mean, it was intense. It was a Monster Hunter party, that is for sure.
I can't remember if it was that one or if it was World, but I remember jumping into one of your parties when y'all were playing it, and you talked about like how long you guys have been playing it and kind of where you were at in the game. And I was like, holy crap, am I not doing something right? Like, these guys are so far ahead. What is going on?
Yeah, that had to have been World, because we had so many TRG people hop in and play that with us at the same time too. And I mean, yeah, I burned myself out, admittedly. After that weekend, I did not play World for a few months because that was so much Monster Hunter in one sitting.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
Yeah.
But so let's go at it with this, man. I mean, we kind of hinted at kind of how the gameplay loop is. I mean, you get your weapon, you go out, you hunt a monster, you take it down, and then you take the resources or the items that you get from the monster back, and you use that to craft new armor, new weapons, and things like that. So it sounds very simplistic, but I've mentioned how complex the game can be because there's a lot of different weapons you can choose from, and they all function completely differently. And some of them are more speed based, some of them are more slow, but they hit hard. Some of them are more based around buffing your team members. And so it gets very complex very quickly. I think if anyone has played one of these games, they're going to realize that, and they can definitely attest to that. But with a game that sounds as complex as it is, or maybe as redundant as it might sound, because you are going to grind some of these monsters out, especially to get a whole armor set. I remember doing that in Monster Hunter World and even 4 Ultimate, trying to get specific armor sets. What is it about these games that make them great, or make them just make you want to keep playing it despite it maybe feeling a little redundant at times? What was it like for you, man? What got you hooked on Monster Hunter?
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Because when talking about the games we were playing right now, I called Bravely Default, and the series a love letter to a fan base. I mean, that's the thing with Monster Hunter, is like, if you don't enjoy the gameplay loop, you're just not going to enjoy it, no matter how much you try to like the game, right? And that's what you were saying with World and its release and it appealing to such a wider base. And I think what caught so many people's attention and love for the game was that the gameplay loop of Monster Hunter is so satisfying in so many ways. Now, for me personally, and if you start delving into Monster Hunter subculture, you'll find that there are a lot of people who have a set weapon that they are just like, this is the weapon I always use in a Monster Hunter game. I try others, but I always end up coming back to this one weapon. And for me, that was my greatsword. For you, I would assume what?
Charge Blade. I love the Charge Blade, dude.
Yeah. So for me, with the greatsword, it's just this massive sword, right? Like I grew up with Final Fantasy VII, right? The Buster Sword with Cloud. I mean, that sword was like the cool, just this massive sword, and this anime dude's just swinging it like it's paper.
Of course.
The Monster Hunter series takes what should be unwieldy and makes it impactful in a way that no other game has ever done for me. And what I mean by is and you briefly mentioned it when you were kind of explaining the gameplay of Monster Hunter, but when you're fighting a Rathalos, which is a big dragon that shoots fireballs at you and has a poisonous tail. Or no, sorry, that's Rathian, the female variant, has poison tail. Rathalos does not. Sorry, Monster Hunter fanatics. Sorry, I won't slip up again.
Just send all your angry letters to Adam's email. Let him know.
There you go. Yeah, Adam, take care of it. You got it, buddy. When you're charging up for an attack with your greatsword, you need to know the attack patterns, the iframes, the kind of, if you want to call them abilities, like when he goes up into the air and takes this kind of position, that means he's going to be shooting fireballs at me, right? So like that replayability comes into play where it's like, oh, okay, once these monsters start getting harder and you get variants and what's the gimmick called for Rise?
I can't remember.
Deviants? Is that what it is? Is that World?
Maybe. I know. I can't.
They've changed the gimmick up through the years, and I always think Deviant, but I don't know. Long story short, it introduces more mechanics to the fight. So here you are, guy who's farmed, 3 hours to try and make this new greatsword that has specific stats and effects that will make this a better greatsword than what I had when I first started the game, right? Like the moment where you finally conquer this massive monster and you're able to find that really rare item that you needed to craft that sword or that armor piece, and you bring it back to town and you finally craft it, the weight of impact that comes with those upgrades is, again, something that I'm a huge MMO guy, have been for most of my life. Favorite game ever is EverQuest 2. Like no game that's similar in like stat weights and everything else has ever felt as good as Monster Hunter makes me feel when I get a gear upgrade, because it directly translates immediately to the gameplay experience that you have. And again, that is not something I've been able to find or replicate in any sort of Monster Hunter clone like Dauntless or any other game, any other RPG for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
Other RPGs, they do like number inflation, right? So like your typical RPG, like why is the glass sword always better in Skyrim versus like, a steel longsword? Well, it's because the glass sword has this damage value. Well, what's different between the glass sword and a steel longsword versus just their appearance, right? And the number value. Nothing changes with the way you're swinging it, right? Nothing changes with how you're using that weapon. Monster Hunter, those things change, and the impact of those changes are felt whenever you experience them. And so I think that alone makes the gameplay loop super appealing, but also, like I said, just gives you that weight of progress that I've never experienced with any other RPG.
Yeah. So in a way, it's like the gameplay is constantly evolving and changing to where you feel like you have it down, but then all of a sudden it throws a variant at you, or the new
Just
weapon.
when you think you've seen enough dragons and weird ape-looking monsters, the game throws a hunt at you that you're just
Yeah,
like, how am I going to beat this monster? This is
yeah,
the craziest thing. 20 hours later, you're like, bro, I'm killing 3 of these at the same time. This is so easy.
yep.
And
I
that's so satisfying.
I remember playing Monster Hunter World, and me and some friends were playing through it, and then we went into the HR rank missions, and we were fighting. I think there was what is it? You fight a rat. I think you fight a Rathalos and a Rathian at the same
Yeah.
time in one of the hunts, and I was just like, why are we fighting 2 of these at the same time? This is ridiculous. But it was that cool thing where we saw, because I was using my charge blade, so it hits hard and you can charge it up to do certain attacks. And then one of my other friends was using the what's the it's the lance that has the shot on it, gun lance.
Gun or charge lance, gun lance. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he was using that, and so he was using different status effects. And I had another friend that was using the staff that lets you send out a bug. Why am I forgetting the names of these weapons? I spent like
dude, I feel
100 hours
so
playing this.
I feel so dumb because it's the exact same. It's the bow staff, I'm pretty positive, but like it's no insect glaive. There we go.
That's it. Thank you. Yeah.
I feel super dumb. You're talking to someone who's put like 1,000+ hours into these games, and you're saying that like, oh, you're stumbling through, and I'm like, oh crap, I can't remember any of them all of a sudden. Yeah.
Well, that makes me feel better then. Hey man, words are hard here in the reform games. Throw the names of weapons. But like when we figured out, we created this like synergy between using these weapons and timing things down, that like that fight between those two got to a point where like it was nothing to us. Right. And like it's funny because we're literally sitting here describing all the things that I love about Dark Souls, and I'm like, this makes sense as to why I love Monster Hunter.
Yep.
And that is the cool thing about this game, is that, and I think World did a really good job of this, of kind of like leaving a trail of breadcrumbs, so to speak, of progression to making sure that you could handle the next fight by teaching you things in the previous fight and some of the different mechanics. And that's the thing, is the game just constantly continues upping the ante a little bit with each new hunt. Yep. And you're just constantly growing as a person. And then that feeling that you get after you take down a giant monster, you're like, oh, this is awesome. But then you start looking at some of the things you get, and you take it back to the town or the hub world, and you look at all the stuff you can craft now, and you realize, oh, this new armor set gives you a higher poison resist. Well, I remember fighting this one monster that that's all it used was poison. I could craft this armor set, go fight that thing, and then get that armor set from it that gives me a fire resistance to something else. And it's this synergy between everything, and it gets you in a gameplay of loop where, if you're a bit of a vanity Souls player like myself, you want to look really good, and you kind of get into that loop too of changing up your gear and your looks and everything to where you want to look really cool, but at the same time you want to max your stats out so you can handle other fights, and then you want to make sure you have a set that's ready for this scenario. And so
that was actually what I was just about to say. That's like the second greatest part about the game, is that min-maxing aspect. Yeah, just there hasn't been another RPG like it where min-maxing is so satisfying and rewarding, and you feel it pretty drastically.
Yeah. And it got me to think about some of the games that I played with these group of guys that I play with. We played Destiny, we played The Division, and like it's a lot of the similar beats, but Monster Hunter really makes you feel like you earned a lot of that progress or those weapons or whatever it is, because I guess it kind of goes back into the whole mindset of hunting in the real world. When you kill a deer or something and you're crafting, I don't know, an antler necklace or whatever it may be, or a blanket out of the pelt or something like that. you take a sense of ownership over that, because it's like, I took the time to hunt this, to take it down and use it to repurpose it for, a basic need. And not really, it's not really much of a basic need in Monster Hunter, because you're killing dinosaurs or whatever to craft a giant sword, but you get the idea. It's that sense of like ownership of like, dude, I spent like 6 hours grinding out this monster to get this set, and it looks so stinking cool. It's got all these great stats that help me out in this other thing, and I was playing with some friends, and it just created these cool memories. And it just it just reminds me of the time when Monster Hunter World came out, and Adam was like, "What's the point of Monster Hunter? Like, what's even the story?" And I'm like, "The story is the ones that you make with your friends when you play it."
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, I think, because that's a big part of Monster Hunter, is playing with friends. You can play it solo if you want, but
that
when
game
you get
sucks solo. I'm just saying
it's
it
really
right now.
bad.
It's a grind. It's not fun for me.
It is not fun playing Monster Hunter World solo, in my opinion, because I did it for 30 or 40 hours of the game, and I'm like, this is not cutting it. And so that kind of begs the question then, Zach, if people play this game, but they don't really have a whole lot of friends, or maybe any friends playing this game, is it worth even trying out?
Well, that's a really good question. I would say World was created with the intention in mind that it was going to be a multiplayer experience. It's the closest thing that the West has ever seen to a Monster Hunter MMO. Now, to be fair, there is a Monster Hunter MMO out there in China. Pretty sure it got shut down, but
wow.
It's not region locked. So if it's still up, anyone can play it. It's free to play. Besides the point, it was definitely created with that in mind. Rise, man, really good question, because from the demo gameplay and from the quality of life enhancements that they've made, specifically with I want to call it a sling bug. It's not a sling bug. It's a what's it? Oh, wire bug. With the wire bug, the wire bug will literally it changes the game. Like, we've never seen a Monster Hunter like Rise. So let me preface it with that, saying, like, I don't know 100% if a solo player is going to find this game appealing, simply because the gameplay experience of this one is going to be unlike anyone that we've played so far. The wire bug really does change everything about the game. It adds new abilities and attack patterns, and I mean, it's a game changer. The Palamute too. You have a mount that you get in this game. We've never had mounts up until this point that you can ride through battle. So yeah, there's a lot of new elements to this game. A lot of quality of life stuff too. So I'm not 100% sure, but I will say, knowing, like, with all the feedback they've received with World, knowing Capcom and the developers of Monster Hunter, I would say this is probably going to be the most solo player friendly experience of Monster Hunter we've ever had, because the Palamute is constantly fighting in battle with you. Your Palico is constantly fighting in battle with you in a way that is different than in previous installations. Yeah, it's gonna be much more solo player friendly, at least from the demo gameplay loop that I've seen so far.
I was gonna agree with that, because I got that feeling too when I played the demo on the Switch. I'm like, this definitely feels more solo player friendly because of all those additions into the game. And of course, dear listeners, if any of you listening are curious about Monster Hunter and you have a Switch, you can go play that demo right now at the time of this recording, and you can go try it out for yourself and see what you think. I did also want to mention, for solo players too who play on the Switch, there is we talked earlier about how there's like spin-off games and games that aren't really part of the mainline stories. Maybe you're looking at Monster Hunter and you're like, The look of all these monsters is really cool. I like that, but I don't really like the idea of getting gear and grinding things out. You can try Monster Hunter Stories, which the second one's coming out on the Switch later this year, which is more of a JRPG style thing where I think it's more turn-based and things like that. So if that's more your style, you can try that out as well. But as we're kind of starting to wrap up here, I have a question on here, which is best for newcomers, but I think what would be good is getting this feedback, this write-in from Third Strongest Mole over on Patreon. You can support us on patreon.com/thereformedgamers and submit your thoughts on different topics. He says the game that he started with was Monster Hunter Tri on the Wii, and he has to admit that he was drawn to the series because of its difficulty. And he goes on to say that I've had a few friends try the Rise demo, and they didn't really like it. Well, I think World did a better job than any game prior of easing people into the game. The Rise demos seemed more geared toward veterans than new players. The tutorials only covered the bare basics and new features like the wire bug, but it left newbies out in the cold when it came to how do I use my specific weapon. What do you think the series needs to do to be more accessible without losing its characteristic depth and challenge? And so, Zach, what do you think, man? Do you think World kind of struck a great balance of easing new players in while still satisfying veterans, or do you think they need to make some changes to maybe make it a little bit more accessible?
It's a good question because the veteran curmudgeon in me goes, oh, these kids, they don't know what's so, they have numbers to tell them damage values. Back in my day, we didn't even have numbers to tell us damage values. We just had to look at the monster, and if it looked tired, then maybe we could trap it, and blah 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 blah. I mean, that element of Monster Hunter was really fun and awesome. And I saw, with the demo, they did bring the number system, the I don't know, the number system. I don't have another term for it, I guess.
Right.
But the damage values came to this game, and honestly, that upset a lot of people that were, those huge fanatic fans, veterans of the game, because it, adding damage value made a ton of sense for World. And I know it sounds really silly, but there really was something special with the older games that, all the way up to 4U, where you just didn't know. Like, you might be 30 minutes into this hunt, end game monster, right? You might be 30 minutes into this hunt, and he's still not showing fatigue. And you've cut off his tail, you've broken his claw, you've, broken the horn. Like, you've done all these things, but you're like, man, am I going to lose this hunt? Like, he doesn't look tired at all, And so, like, discovering mannerisms and actions of a monster when it reaches certain thresholds of health was really fun and added an element of gameplay that World does still strike, because thank God they didn't reveal health bars, but I think that really would have taken away from the experience. But I don't know. I'm kind of torn, because it seems like Rise is definitely going to be for those veteran players like myself who World, struck that balance pretty well for new players to the genre and to the game. But there are a lot of us who World lost its appeal pretty quickly, because there was just something missing, some sort of charm that the other Monster Hunter games had that World didn't have. And I think that's what I was trying to get at in the beginning of talking about this, at the beginning of our talk, was that, World does feel like its own thing when we talk about the Monster Hunter universe, right? Like, World really does feel like its own beast altogether. And, Rise, 4U, Generations, those kind of Monster Hunter games feel like the other branch of the same tree.
Yeah.
So I'm not really answering the question, but admittedly, I would say if the demo doesn't appeal to you, know that the demo gives you some really strong gear, and it's not trying to tell you how to play the game because it's just trying to show you a taste of combat and mechanics, right?
Mm-hmm.
The game itself, we don't know how it's going to start, how they're going to tie in story, if at all.
Right.
Tutorial. It's definite. I can almost promise you, it is not going to have the kind of tutorial that World had. World was, in my opinion, as a veteran to the series, World was kind of overreached with its tutorial. I mean, it was really boring and very, very, very basic. I don't remember. Maybe you do. I kind of feel like the first hour and a half of World, I could be wrong on that number, but it felt like the first hour at least was super boring because it had you killing monsters that died in like 2 to 3 hits.
Yeah.
Kind of
I
like
remember
the sub monsters.
I was gonna say, I remember it being super slow, and I was trying to like rush through it because I'm like, I know like what Monster Hunter is, and this is
Right.
just
And what
this is
waits
not
me.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. See, the other Monster Hunter installations, they had maybe 2 to 3 quests of rank 1 that did that. But honestly, once you got to like rank 2 and 3, which is pretty quick, it just kind of throws you into the thick of it.
Yeah.
And I really hope Rise does that, only because World, as we've said, a few times now, was a great introduction to the series. Rise, I hope, is the evolution of that introduction, where just as we were saying with Demon Souls versus Dark Souls 3, there's a lot of good things that the Demon Souls formula created that Dark Souls still follows, right? But on the whole, Dark Souls 3 is just a better game.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping with the added mechanics, the new attacks and attack animations and mount combat that this one has, I really hope, and I am hopeful, that it's going to strike a really good balance between satisfying the most hardcore veterans, such as myself, while also, if you stick with it, newcomer, while also really turning out to satisfy those who started with World maybe, or those who don't have a ton of experience with the game. I think it will please the hands and fingers of those who play the game.
Yeah. And I think with that too, I mean, I think World did a really good job of bringing new people in and at least keeping me around because I mean, I only played I think one other Monster Hunter game prior to World. It's one of those things where Monster Hunter is a game that you only get out of it what you put into it, and
absolutely
they can only do so much to really make it accessible. I think World did a really good job of it, in my opinion, while still keeping some of the core stuff in there that's really complex and holds veterans around. And it gets to a point where, if you're playing the game and you're just not really feeling it, you just got to make that decision of, I don't think this game is for me, or being like, I'm going to put some more time into this and try to figure this out and see if it clicks. And I think part of the fun of the game is really, especially at the beginning when you're trying to figure out which weapon you like, is picking the weapon that you like or trying out a few different ones and just goofing off with it and trying to see what you can and can't do. And I do think they could probably, and maybe they did this in World and I just don't remember. I think they could do a better job of like explaining how some of the weapons work. Cause I remember at least when I played 4 Ultimate and I was trying to figure out how the charge blade worked, like I had to go online and read forums and figure out like, what was I doing. And, and I don't remember. I want to say World had something in there that taught you that a little bit, but I can't remember. I think if they had something in there, at least for some of the newcomers, that would be great. Because I know how it is. You drop into the game and there's like 17 or 18 different weapons, and you're like, which one do I use? And so I think they could probably handle that better. But again, this goes back to Monster Hunter Rise isn't out yet at the time of this recording, so we don't know what all they've really done to keep people hooked and to get new players in. So it's like what you said. Hopefully, it's an evolution of kind of what they've been doing over the last several games.
I will say, again, I'm a millennial, right? Like, I don't feel old, but I'm starting to realize as we talk more about this, like, man, I really am old in the sense that, like, you and I mean, I don't know. Do you remember the first time you played Metroid?
Yeah.
Do you remember how hard that was?
Yeah.
Especially as a kid. Like, do you remember, like, I remember playing Legend of Zelda, getting to the overworld and going, what am I doing? I had to grab a notebook and had my sister write down notes of, like, I went over here to the left and down past this tree and discovered this secret. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
There comes a point where too much hand-holding actually takes away from the experience of discovery.
Yeah.
And, I'll be honest, when I first started playing the game, yes, I used the internet to research, like, min-maxing gear and everything else. But I was really thankful for the friend that showed me the series, because I was asking him so many questions. He's like, well, just make one and go hunt. Like, just go hunt with it and see what you find, And I think that was part of the most, that was one of the most fun aspects of Monster Hunter, was discovering what those monsters did, but then also discovering how, the longsword versus the bow, how much of a drastic gameplay difference those two weapons make. I mean, it feels like a different game.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually something we didn't touch on, but I think it applies here, is where, like, discovering those weapons, yes, they probably should at least, like, add combo lists, which I know they did with Worlds. They kind of hide them. They don't make it obvious.
Right.
But they should probably do that for sure. They did that with 4U, if I remember, if I'm remembering right. But yeah, I don't know. There's just a sense of, like, I don't know, and maybe this is like the old role player in me, but it's like there is some sense of, like, if you just gave me a great sword in real life, I would have to use it for a while before I felt comfortable with it. You know what I mean? If you gave me a longsword and shield in real life, I'm going to fight differently, but I'm also going to take time to figure out how to best use this weapon compared to a greatsword. So, I think that's what Monster Hunter does so well, so many times, with the variants and weapons, that, a really in-depth tutorial system of it, I feel like, would just take away from the gameplay loop of discovering it.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, and obviously it's a personal preference thing at the end of the day,
right.
too. But at least with my own experience with the game, I think that was equally some of the most frustrating parts and some of the most rewarding parts, because man, when you charge up that greatsword attack and you come down on a Rathalos's tail and chop it off, that is like, and you finally learned all of it, after dying, so many times, learning, like, how to set it up and finally doing it and, like, getting used to the weapon that way. Oh man, like I said, there's no other game that is just as satisfying.
Yeah. I'm going back to thinking about how when I really started learning how to use the charge blade and learning the combo of, like, leaping in and doing a swiping attack, doing a 3-hit combo, and then transitioning it to the battle axe, and then that somehow stuns the monster, and then you can swing it around and do a 3 or 4-hit combo with the charged portion, satisfying. And it just ignites these different explosions going off, and then it it's so thrilling when you see it. But I think that goes into how this game is really a community oriented game. It's one of those games that it's okay to have questions, but at the same time play it within a community. Now I'm getting like an idea like this is how it's supposed to be in the church. You know, you're supposed to have questions and then play with any
Right.
community. But it's just one of those things. I mean, there's gonna be a ton of us playing Monster Hunter Rise in the TRG community. So, dear listeners, if any of you are curious about the game and you're gonna be picking it up, or you tried the demo and you have questions, definitely reach out to us on Discord, Facebook group, and all that stuff. Of that being said, but to answer third strongest most question, I don't know, man. I thought World did an amazing job, and we'll see what Rise does and kind of go from there. But
Yeah,
with
sorry
that
for
being
not
said,
answering your question third
no,
strongest goal.
it's good, man. But like I said, we are out of time on this episode. But dear listeners, if you've played Monster Hunter or you're looking to get into the game, definitely reach out to us in the variety of ways that you can contact us. Links will be in your show notes to the Discord server, Facebook group, Twitter, everywhere that TRG exists. You'll have links to it on there. But like I said, a lot of us will be playing Monster Hunter Rise this Friday when it comes out. So why not hop on into the community and join us as we hunt dinosaurs and monsters together. It's going to be a good time. Zach and Luke and then will probably already have like the highest rank gear by the time you and me join, but it'll be good. They can be our Sherpas and guide us through it.
To that point, this is actually one of the coolest parts of Rise, and I can't believe we almost forgot to mention it. There's going to be a scaling system for ranks. So even though I will probably be far ahead of most of our listeners at some point, I can still play with them, and like my gear will scale down so that like we don't have to, change out gears and everything else. Like I'll be able to play with any rank online. This is something that not even World had. So it's a new feature that I'm really excited for, because it, as you just said, it's a community-based game for sure. I think this change is really going to push that community aspect to the next level.
Definitely. That's cool. I didn't know I was going to have that. So that'll be good to have, though. That'll definitely open up the pool of players to group up with. Now, before we get into the recos of the show, as always, this is our second episode of the month. I know Adam and Skinner already did a patron thank you episode, but hey, I didn't get to do one, so I'm going to do one in this episode. So,
thank you. You love me. You really love me.
These are the patrons who have graciously supported us over on Patreon this past month. And if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be able to continue doing this show. So thank you to these patrons: Alex Castellanos, Andre Swan, Ashley Cronenbitter, Christopher Commander, Daryl Tavares, David B., David Henderson, Derek Smith, Jake Walker, James Barker, Jeff Jackson Jr., Jimmy Chonga, that's an awesome name, Joanne Monroe, Josh Broccolo, Caleb Kokorodaki, Mark Frummy, Matt Edwards, Matthew White Chocolate McDougal, Matthew Millsap, Micah Hendrick, Michael Toller, Mr. Butts.
Hey,
there it
Mr.
is.
Butts, we couldn't do this without you, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you for supporting us with the $15 tier. Nate McKeever, Pastor Shay, Retro Rewind Podcast, Ryan 1701E, Sam White, Samuel Kalunga, Third Strongest Mole, Weatherman Keefe, Wesley Ray, and Xavier Medina. Y'all, thank you so much for supporting us over on patreon.com/the Reform Gamers. Because of your support, we're able to continue doing what we do on this show. Now, before we let you go, some recos.
If you have the means, I highly recommend picking one up.
Zach, what's something or some things that our dear listeners should check out?
Well, we kind of mentioned it already, but go play the demo. If you have a Switch, go play the demo right now. It's free, super quick download, and, well, super quick download if you don't live in the middle of nowhere. But easy download, really easy to hop into. It should give you a really great idea of what's going to be coming at you in the game. Reach out again, as Logan said, Facebook group. I'm going to be there trying to corral everyone to Discord server and connecting with everyone there. So I'll be ready to play with you. My other recommendation, really quick, this has come up in the group quite a bit recently, and it's something that I've become more passionate about as time has gone on, especially in seminary. But I want to recommend to everyone, it's called On Fairy Tales. It's by J.R.R. Tolkien. some of you might know him for creating Lord of the Rings, the best, one of the best pieces of art ever created. So in this, it's a short essay / lecture where he talks about the necessity of imagination in the Christian's life and the necessity for fantasy in our lives, and why they're so important, to culture and to man himself. So highly recommend it. Somewhat quick read. You can actually find it online even. So check it out. It's a good read.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. That is actually a really good book. That actually leads into what one of my recos is read more books. Read more books. In the time that I spent away from content creation, I made a intentional effort to read more books. And man, I've rediscovered my love for reading. And so there's a lot of good books out there. Find one on a topic that interests you and check them out. It's funny. I went so far down the Dark Souls rabbit hole that I not only did I binge several videos on Vati Vidya's channel on YouTube, just going down through the lore of the games, I found out that there were books that detailed the development history and people's reaction to the different Dark Souls games. And I'm like, just give me all those books. So I started one that covers Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. And I'm reading through that now. And I'm just like,
that's crazy.
And then I found the soundtracks on Spotify, and I listened to those while I was doing sermon prep, and I'm like, this is the most epic sermon I've ever done.
Dark Souls 3's soundtrack is amazing.
It's so good, man. There's nothing quite like preparing a lesson on evangelism when you're listening to the Nameless Kings theme song with the choir and all that. Oh, it's nuts. I loved it. But yeah, so read more books. Always good stuff. The other thing, I'm going to ask for some prayer because me and my wife, it's funny. Last episode, Skinner and Adam both were recoing adoption and fostering, and I was like, challenge accepted. And me and my wife started the adoption process, and we're moving our way through that pretty quickly. So we would greatly appreciate your prayers as we go through that process. It is exciting. It is a little intimidating, but mostly exciting. Long-time listeners know I have a lot of anxiety and I worry about anything and everything. This is one of the few things in my life that I'm not worried about at all. I'm more excited than anything else. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, man. We are so stoked. Already bought up several Dr. Seuss books and Berenstein Bear books. So I'm like, let's get this kid's library started, man. That's how I roll. But yeah, so we are starting that, so you guys can be praying for us. We greatly appreciate it. But with that being said, episode 187 of the Foreign Gamers is coming to a close. If you would like to support the show, maybe you like what we do here, you can buy merch, shirts, hats, stickers, and stuff like that on our merch store. Link will be in your show notes. You can support us on Patreon, as we've mentioned before on this episode, to get the episodes early and uncut. So if you're listening to this after Skinner's edited it and you want to hear how goofy I sound before Skinner edits it, support us on Patreon at the $1 tier, and you get these episodes early and uncut. And plus, you get some cool pre-show talk too as well. You can also interact with us on, really, if you just go to our website, it has links to everything on there. So the reformedgamers.com has links to our Instagram, Facebook page, Facebook group, Twitter, Discord server, all that stuff. Plus, the website has a bunch of different articles and extra content, as does our YouTube channel. So all that stuff will be in your show notes. So you guys can check that out there and enjoy. But Zach, man, thank you for joining me on this episode and being a Monster Hunter bro.
Absolutely. It was super fun to be here. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, man, looking forward to playing Monster Hunter Rise this Friday, and hopefully we'll be playing with some of you, dear listeners. But with that being said, episode 180, what episode? There it is. Words are hard. I thought I was going to make it through one episode without saying it, but it happened. Episode 180. I'm going to stop trying to say the number.
187. Woo!
Thank you. Be a dear. Keep it locked here. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Reformed Gamers, the podcast all about theology and gaming. TRG is edited by Dear Ear Productions, so thank them for the buttery smooth tones in your ear. If you're looking for extra content, head on over to youtube.com/The Reformed Gamers. The Reformed Gamers is entirely fan-supported over on patreon.com/reformedgamers by our dear patrons. The following deer are at the producer level or higher and will forever be thanked at the end of each show, as long as their pledge comes through, or we forget to update the audio. Those people are Mr. Butts, Caleb, Alex Castellanos, Pastor Shay, and Wesley Ray. Thank you for your support on patreon.com, keeping our controllers charged, and supporting Logan in his never-ending quest to collect them all. Platinum trophies, that is. So be a deer and keep it locked here. Keep listening. We'll catch you later.